Tell me who you are and
I'm Carl Pope, the Executive Director of the Sierra Club.
what are you doing here?
I'm here to hopefully help move us towards an effective agreement to help curb the climate crisis.
And what would be an effective agreement in your mind?
An effective agreement would have to involve three key ingredients. First of all, the nations that are already using more than their share of the world's carbon sinks need to commit to a very rapid pace of modernizing and decarbonizing their economies. We need to find a financial mechanism to enable the rest of the world to catch up with the low carbon development pathway, and we need to establish a set of international monitoring and oversight mechanisms to make sure that we're on track.
And what message would you like to send back to the people in the States who will mostly be watching this?
Well, I think the key thing for Americans to understand is that we have an enormous global opportunity here. It's unfortunate that these negotiations are being characterized by governments as a matter of who's going to lose, when the real issue here is we all have an enormous opportunity to win by building a new energy future and by restoring the climate.
Can you talk a little bit more about that new energy future, what that would look like?
Well, the fact is fossil fuels are the past, and most Americans recognize that. They recognize and the fact is most Americans recognize it. They recognize that fossil fuels and our dependence on fossil fuels are the source of so many of our nation's problems. It produces most of our trade deficit. It leaves us dependent on dangerous nations in the Middle East. It is disrupting the climate. It is creating enormous public health harm to our people. We all understand and know that energy productivity and renewables, wind, solar, electric cars are the future, and America needs to get going or we're going to be left behind. The fact is, right now, the real energy innovation of the world is not happening in the United States, although that's where much of the technology came from. The real energy innovation is happening in China and Europe, and it's time for America to wake up and catch up.
Obviously, Sierra Club is one of the biggest environmental organizations. Can you talk a bit about the impact of climate on the environment as it matters to Sierra?
Well, first of all, if you look at the fact that human society developed in a period of great climatic stability. The last 1,000 years we've had extraordinary climatic stability. That's what's enabled us to build a civilization that's as comfortable and affluent as it is. And as we saw with Katrina, natural forces, if they get destabilized, can do an enormous amount of damage to our communities. So from the point of view of the Sierra Club, we're putting ourselves at risk, and that's very foolish. We ought to be looking ahead to the future and saying, wait a minute, we don't want a future in which we see an event like Katrina every year or two. We want a future in which Katrina never happens again.
Well, tell me a bit more about climate science. There's been some controversy. What do you think the state of the climate science is
Well,
today?
the state of the climate science is we know that if we keep messing up the chemistry of the atmosphere, we will destabilize the climate. The idea that climate science is not certain is simply it's in fact a myth that's being propagated. It is true. We do not know precisely how the climate in the Midwest will change from climate change. But if you're a corn farmer, you don't want the climate to change either way. You don't want it to be colder, you don't want it to be warmer, because your whole economy has been built on a stable climate. So the thing that the climate skeptics tell us, oh, we're not certain what's going to happen, and that's supposed to make me feel safe? When I don't know what's going to happen with the weather, I feel insecure, and we need to understand the climate science is very clear. We are disrupting the world's weather with our emissions of greenhouse pollutants, and it's a very, very foolish thing for us to be doing.
All right, and